All couples photos posted by LeBron and Steph Curry.
He put that heart emoji everywhere, man, and he was not unlike many other people that I follow on social media.
Did he post a picture of he and his lady for Valentine's Day?
Ooh.
I didn't hear anything about that, did he? Because he might be the one playing the game right. He out here like, oh, you guys look like you're in love with this amateur macking that y'all are doing out here.
Yes. Meanwhile, though, I do think people appreciate it when you smash that heart button a little bit. You know, they're like, oh.
You know me, I don't do that.
You don't? Have you liked anything?
Sometimes.
First name is Colin Kaepernick, but we have news today. The legal representation of Kaepernick, Eric Reed, and the NFL have put out a joint statement announcing they've resolved their pending grievances. So what do you make of the news?
I mean, we don't know what the settlement is. We are assuming that there was some money exchange in the course of this. I would love to know how much money this was, because the NFL decided, apparently, their chances of winning this were not good enough for them to deal with what would happen if all this stuff came out in open proceedings. But it will be very difficult for the people who are the better part of the last 2 years of change, have carried the water for all the reasons that Colin Kaepernick is not in the NFL, that went away from something untoward being the case. How do you spin this now?
If you've been following these proceedings dating back to last August, when that arbitrator said, no, you guys can proceed with this, and therefore we can get John Elway, ownership, all of these executives getting deposed, right? If you've been following that stuff, this shouldn't be surprising. We have known that there is a point to what Colin Kaepernick has been alleging. But now we have an official declaration that, yes, this was worth us spending some amount of money to make it go away.
Well, here's what I want to know. Kaepernick and Reed and Garagos, their lawyer, how much did they charge for this confidentiality agreement that's in place? Because that, to me, is the thing that is worth the most money on their side, because the NFL is the only side that wins for keeping this confidential. Kaepernick and Reed kind of ultimately lose. They're in a tricky place because we're assuming that there's money involved, right? So the arguments are already coming out on the other side. They were just in it for money. Yes. It's a lawsuit. What the hell do you think that the lawyer was there for? It's a lawsuit from a dude who feels like he lost his job unfairly. Of course it's going to wind up being about money. But the problem with having the side that deems itself to be noble is that any financial exchange for you is often seen by people as selling out. But the people who say that the loudest are not the people on your side, but the people who are trying to impugn you. The NFL wins by us not knowing exactly what happened.
Yes, and the NFL, by the way, is doing the right thing here, purely cynically, purely strategically, right? Let's say the over-under that Mike Florio posted is $50 million, right? That's nothing to the NFL. They can afford all of that. What they are saying is, I think, look, people's minds on this issue will not be changed if we resolve the lawsuit as they did in fact do it today. So what they're really saying is, we would like our people to stop being interviewed and bothered about this such that we are embarrassed and humiliated going forward.
What they're also saying is that $50 million or whatever the money is worth it to make sure this dude doesn't play football again.
So you think he's done?
No, I mean, let's see what happens on the back end. Let's see if there's a possibility that he then winds up on a roster. I absolutely think that he is done. I think that if anybody was going to bring him on, they wouldn't have cared about this little lawsuit. They'd have gone ahead and done it in the first place. So if he doesn't play again for the NFL, they are saying, yes, it is worth X amount of dollars to us just to not have you come out here and do this. We want to push you this far away from the playing field. Now, my question for Kaepernick as this goes from here, we haven't heard from him publicly, what, in about 2 years?
A long time.
Okay, so if this has been settled, you're not really the guy being blackballed by the NFL anymore. So as this goes forward, who are you? What are you saying? What are you working toward? You don't owe me an answer on that necessarily, but I think it's fair for us to ask that, because the big thing now was he should be in the NFL. Well, he's let that slide now. So where does it go from here?
Right. I think he needs to be outspoken. He needs to say, I'm using this money towards X causes to, at the very least, satiate those people.
Forget about what you're doing with the money. What are you doing? You don't know anything about what he's doing. I don't care what he does with the money. Next name is Dell Demps. Pelicans general manager has been fired. Per Woj, ownership was mad because Anthony Davis got hurt and left the arena during the game, and owner Gail Benson wants the GM to take command of the Davis trade talks, reshape the roster. Pablo, what's your reaction to this move?
This is about things bigger than the injury that we saw yesterday. This is about the fact that, look, Gail Benson in this story by Woj was talking about being angry at outside forces, right? She does not want Anthony Davis to be a Laker. That was true before the deadline. That is true now. And now what they're doing is finally saying, okay, now that Dell's gone, it's time for us to finally behave like a real basketball team. Because what we had before was a lot of theater, right? It was a lot of, no, we're going to make this tough on the people, the outside forces who are trying to bully us into doing something. But in all honesty, this is a team run by football people that needs a basketball person. And yes, they're going to go get that person in theory.
Yeah, now let's forget about this outside forces thing for just a second. Because one thing that they made a point of was that we don't want to send Davis to where he wants to go at the expense of what makes sense for the team. Where he wants to go, you don't even need to mention that part. All you have to say is, we don't want to make a trade that hurts our team. What they also don't want to do out of petty spite is let him go to a place that he actually wants to go to. Now, teams and players rather try to wield this and be like, hey, I'm not going to go somewhere and sign an extension in these other places to try to make themselves go there. But it seems that the pettiness that was driving the trade talks that weren't trade talks are also present right now. Now, with firing Demps, I don't know what this solves. I don't know at all. All it tells us, and I agree with the people who've had this theory, when they had those trade talks before, Dell Demps did not have the authority to even dream of making a trade. I don't know why he was even answering the phone.
No, and Dell Demps probably shouldn't have even had this job at that point, because what they are realizing here very belatedly is that we need someone whose incentives, right, long-term are aligned with our franchises. Dell Demps was never going to be long for this team. David Stern kind of said as much when he made fun of him about losing Anthony Davis way back when. So they need a guy who actually is going to oversee the future of the team. They could have gotten rid of Dell Demps last year and started this process, but instead, because of the outside forces, they wanted to say, okay, that was this guy, let's start a new chapter.
Well, that's what I'm about to say. They're trying to run a trick that'll probably work, which would be like, yeah, okay, we've been a bunch of amateurs, but he the one that's the amateur. You the one that owned it. By the way, shout out to Alvin Gentry, because he's just in the middle of this, and my man done had enough.
To tell you the truth, this whole thing has been a dumpster fire, and it's just hard, for guys. We want guys to be professional and we want them to do this, but it's hard for guys, to go through what they've been through. Don't know if he left the building or not. I have no idea. Then he left the building. I'm happy for the guys that, that played the game and we won.
This is a man who is taking, I think, the biggest L of everybody because his job is to, be judged by wins and losses. And now he has a player who's potentially going to be out for some amount of time. And yeah, he has to answer to people.
Hold on, what's the one reason he took the job?
To coach Anthony Davis.
The only reason he took this job to coach Anthony Davis. They won a championship in 2015 in Golden State. And he's in the locker room talking to Anthony Davis. Now he doesn't even really get to coach Anthony Davis. He's got him on the team, and they tell him you can't play him in the fourth quarter. You got to try to get all these other dudes out here pretending like winning matters to them when winning clearly doesn't matter to a front office that doesn't know what it's doing. Good luck, Alvin.
Good luck. Our last name is Rich Paul. LeBron pushed back against critics claiming he and his agent Rich Paul were recruiting Zion Williamson at the Duke-Virginia game, saying, quote, "A recruiting trip? I didn't talk to anybody. They're only saying that because it's Rich. Rich is a threat to everybody. They don't say that about no other agent but my guy because he's a threat. And he's African-American too. Throw that in there." End quote. So, Bo, why is LeBron defending Rich Paul like this?
Well, first of all, everything that's right there on the screen is true. Right? At least as far as I can tell. Rich Paul is a threat. I don't think Rich Paul handles business that much different than anybody else does, but you hear a lot more about him, and being black is probably part of the discussion.
Aussie stuff.
However, we're here because of you, LeBron. There ain't nobody talking about Rich Paul sitting at the Virginia game and what that means. It's because you were there and people believe that you run this agency. So I think he had some things he wanted to say about Rich Paul and took this as the opportunity. But you're not going to tell me for a second, LeBron, that you love Zion so much that you went to Pittsburgh and Charlottesville to see him.
And you don't need to speak to him to recruit. That's the statement, the part of the statement where I was like, we've seen college coaches show up at gyms merely to signal that they are there to convey interest. That seems to be what LeBron is doing with Rich Paul in terms of signaling interest on behalf of Clutch, the sports agency you mentioned. But we've also seen LeBron have his cake and want to eat it too. He wants to be very powerful. He wants to be a future owner. But one of the things he cannot admit is that he is Rich Paul's not only client, but his benefactor, the guy who met him in an airport in Akron when Rich Paul was selling jerseys out of his car, and they became fast friends, and Rich Paul became excellent at his job. but that relationship is pretty undeniable.
Yeah, but see, that's where the stuff he's talking about does come in. Because here's the thing. All you need to be an agent is game. You don't need no college degree. You don't need to go any of these places. What's my man, MC Breed? You get game, I ain't going to sell it to you at Harvard or Yale. You get it wherever it is that you get it. And this dude had enough game to sell LeBron James a throwback jersey and turn that into being his agent.
Absolutely.
And that absolutely is going to scare the hell out of people who are established and entrenched in this job. Because in the end, not anybody can be a good agent, but damn near anybody can think they can be a good agent. And a whole lot of people have gone from the I can think it to making it here. And now you've got this dude who's got the ultimate recruiter, whether he thinks he's a recruiter or not, on his side. Yeah, he's going to threaten a whole lot of people. But come on, LeBron. Coming up next, Charles Barkley called Luka Doncic a bad white boy. Woo.
High Noon is also a podcast. Bomani has one too, and so do I. Pablo is an excellent podcast guest, but apparently there are questions as to whether he is host material.